My grandfather was a Vietnamese soldier who fought during the war between the US and Vietnam during the 1970s, going through fierce battles, moments of life and death, times witnessing comrades sacrificed on the battlefield, mass graves of hundreds of lives, and many, many other things that haunted my grandfather's mind when peace was restored. But after a while, my grandfather decided to spend the rest of his life traveling around Vietnam, looking for the places where his comrades lay down. Many people asked, "Why don't you go to faraway places instead of enjoying your old age?" But he rejected all prejudices and still left on a sunset afternoon in 1991. Then from there on the journey throughout Vietnam, he witnessed and heard many stories that were not only horror, but also thrilling, mysterious, and scary about the spiritual events here, about the wandering souls, the events witnessed with our own eyes without any solutions. And it took a long time of persuasion before he was willing to share what he had experienced. And without making everyone wait too long, I will recount my grandfather's entire journey while here, hoping everyone will listen and comment so I can bring better stories next time. And his story is just about spiritual stories with no answers. As for the issue of the past war, I will not go into detail because the past is over. Let's enjoy the moment of peace. Thank you. I still remember that night in April 1966. After repelling the enemy attack, our team consists of exactly 4 people, including Kant, Hien, Kwok, and Mi Khan is the youngest, only 21 years old. Then I am 23 years old, Kwok is 25 years old, and Hien is 27 years old. We are evacuating innocent people to the North Ingang through the village. This place seems to have just gone through a bloody war. Not a single person in sight. Looks like everyone here has evacuated. Everything is desolate and ruined. And we decided to choose a house in this ruin to stay overnight. We divided the guard. Hien and I guarded first, while Khan and Kwok went to sleep. Hien and I drew lots to see who would guard first and who would guard in the back. The house where we lived was located at the beginning of the village. There are a few scattered houses around, a few mango trees and bamboo bushes. The night is quiet. Occasionally a gust of wind blows past, making the bamboo bushes rustle. Behind the house is a banana garden that was broken by bombs, and the leaves fell to the ground. In the distance, there are a few ruined houses. The only light is the moonlight that illuminates the entire area. The chirping of crickets and the sound of frogs echoing in the night are sounds that everyone who serves as a soldier here must hear. What remained was only a quiet night, terrifyingly quiet. We didn't dare light up and quickly ate a few pieces of dry food to fill our stomachs, afraid that the enemy will attack. Suddenly, I watch in front and you stay behind. At that time, I remember it was after 1 a.m. Suddenly, from far away, under the dim moonlight, there was an old woman or someone with wrinkled skin. Both hands hold something in front of the stomach. From across the street where the bamboo bushes are run past the right side of the house, I took a defensive stance immediately. But I could only see that shadow passing by for a split second. The grass and trees still swayed gently. Even though there was no wind, I hid close to the wall and looked out but didn't see anything. But it felt like she ran toward the back of the banana bushes where the ruined house was. I signaled him, but he said he didn't see anything. The image of that old woman still flashed in my mind, and suddenly I remembered, why can you run so fast? Is the old lady old? But why can't you hear footsteps while running? Questions kept coming to my mind that I couldn't answer 1:30 a.m. We returned in double shifts, probably due to lack of sleep, causing dizziness. Slowly fall asleep. Has anyone asked what I'm most afraid of here? I won't think, but will answer that the scariest thing is silence. When there is nothing, you expect something, and indecision can really kill you. About 20 minutes later, Kayan ran from the back of the house and shook us awake. Kwok also followed. Khan was sweating profusely on his face. His trembling hands pulled my shirt and said, "They also just saw something white glide quickly towards the ruined houses and then disappear." We didn't sleep anymore but sat up and took the gun. Could it be that the enemy is playing a trick to make us make noise? To find our hiding place? But suddenly, Kwok spoke up. The person with the most experience in this place of fierce war pat us on the shoulder and say, "Do you know what else is here besides humans?" I don't believe it either. These are all myths. There are no supernatural phenomena in the age of science. Until I see it, later, when I have a chance, I will tell you about it. If you don't believe it, just sit here quietly and observe. I guarantee that in no less than 20 minutes, it will pass by again. So we followed its orders. Ian and I guarded the front, can and national vigil in the background. I looked at the clock. It was already 2 a.m. My eyes were tired. In this place of war, there's nothing more precious than a good night's sleep. While I was trying to reassure myself, I saw it again. That white shadow, it flashed before my eyes again. Under the dim moonlight, this time I can see more clearly. An old woman with wrinkled skin, wearing a white knee-length t-shirt, quite large compared to her frail body. The head wears a conical hat. It seemed like there was so much blood that it soaked a large area of her back. His hands were holding or carrying something in his stomach, because it was so dark and so fleeting for a split second. I didn't have time to look closely, but something more horrifying caught my eye. When I glanced down, I didn't hear his footsteps running or any other sounds. Just like that, about 8 meters away from me. In just 2 seconds, the old woman disappeared behind the ruined house. Kwok signaled, waited until morning, and then came over to check. Now, if we go there, sometimes we will be ambushed by the enemy and will not be able to return alive early in the morning. We slowly walked towards that ruined house. Last night it was dark, and we couldn't see clearly, but when it was bright, everything slowly appeared clearly. We searched around the banana bushes, but found nothing. Carefully, step by step, towards the ruined house. Then we were horrified when we saw the ruins under the wall. It was the body of an old woman wearing a white shirt, a hat covering most of her face, but still enough for us to see. An old woman about 70 years old. One leg was broken, bent to the side. The other leg was still wearing a worn sandal. Together, we lifted the ruined wall, and Kanj couldn't hold back his fear and screamed. The thing she ran with yesterday was the old woman's intestines. It protruded and scattered all over the floor. The blood has dried. I guess he must have been dead for about 2-3 days. But why can these phenomena occur? Perhaps her soul intentionally wanted to show it to us. In war, we saw quite a few corpses, but to see the soul before seeing the body was probably the first time in my life. Don't know how to explain it, but it's true. After that, according to Kwosi's orders, we held a funeral for the old woman. Even though we are not family members, seeing that scene, none of us could hold back the emotions in our hearts. In the spring of 1967, the year the Vietnam War was raging, the U.S. military carried out many operations to wipe out the Southern Liberation Army. One of those operations was the Cedar Falls operation, which took place in the Cu Chi Tunnels area in Saigon. A Vietnamese army squad was patrolling in the forest near the bunkers in the tunnels when they were suddenly ambushed by American troops. The fighting was fierce. Our squad suffered many casualties. In the end, our army platoon won, temporarily repelling the attack. The sound of bullets stopped. Next to me was Hyan still lying panting. Perhaps we had lost our comrades. I looked everywhere, but there was no one. We slowly went deeper into the forest, hoping to find our teammates. It was about 7 p.m. We found a small cottage. We slowly approached. There was an old woman picking vegetables behind the house. Feeling everything was safe, we breathed a sigh of relief and approached. And surprisingly, we were told by the old woman that there was a soldier recuperating in the basement of the house who was on our side. We quickly ran back to check, and it was Khan. He was lying unconscious, sometimes groaning in pain. The bullet wound did not hit a dangerous place, so his life was not in danger. So we felt secure and gave him first aid. Bandage its wound. The old lady told us that there was a girl who was collecting firewood in the forest. She was a local person, and she found Kant in the forest, lying dying. She brought Kant to take shelter in the forest. Old lady's house. She took it down to the cellar and took care of it. We were so grateful to the old lady. We felt like we had been saved, and stayed at the old lady's house to recuperate, and waited late at night to return to the base. During the day, they will hide to avoid enemy raids. The next night, at about 8 o'clock, when the 3 soldiers were sleeping, waiting to take action until late, they suddenly heard a strange noise outside. Hien went outside to look and saw a figure standing in the middle of the forest. He said the figure was tall, wearing black clothes, and had no face. It was scared and didn't know what was going on. He quickly ran into the house and locked the door. The next morning, we told the old lady about the figure. After hearing this, the old woman was very worried. She told them that it was the ghost of a Vietnamese soldier who died 2 months ago. Every night when she lay in the house, she heard lamenting moans, but when she went to see, she was surprised. Didn't see anyone. The old woman said that the soldier was a kind man. He sacrificed his life to protect this place. The old woman also said that the soldier's ghost came to her in a dream, asking for help finding his remains, and also reporting that his name was Nguyen Vo Danch, died in a bomb crater right at the edge of the forest in the west, but she was old and weak, even though she tried to find him. Searched, but so far she has not found it. After listening to the old woman's story, I felt very moved. We decided to help the old lady find a way to help that soldier's ghost. We went to the forest, where the soldier's ghost appeared according to her instructions. We lit an incense stick and prayed for that soldier, and also told that soldier about what happened, hoping he would help us find our way back to the base. A miracle happened, as if guided by his soul. When we followed the clues of bloodstains and torn pieces of cloth on the tree trunk, we found his body half buried, luckily still alive. Wholesome. Perhaps blood loss was caused by shrapnel from enemy bombs. We hastily dug the ground and buried him, not forgetting to use the bamboo stick to make a tombstone, just like what he had dreamed of, for the old woman to burn incense and pray for him to rest in peace. After we finished praying, in the distance, hidden behind the old bamboo trees, a white shadow appeared, blurry in the mist, waved to us, and then slowly disappeared. Not only me, but Hyen also saw it. Early in the morning, we went home and told the old woman the whole story. The old woman was very happy. She told us that they had helped the soldier's ghost escape. We feel very happy, knowing that we have done a good job, and also felt grateful to the old lady for her help. We stayed at the old lady's house for 2 more days, so Kahan could walk again. Then we found our way back to the unit and told the entire story they encountered to the unit and prayed for their comrades who died while fighting steadfastly to protect their homeland. War is cruel. My channel recounts my grandfather's journey from the war in Vietnam to the journey through Vietnam to learn about the spiritual stories, supernatural events, and souls who have not passed away. In the previous episode, we heard about the journey of him and his comrades being saved by an old woman and accidentally discovering a soldier's soul wandering in the forest. A very good and humane story. If you haven't watched it yet, you can watch it again. I'll leave the story link below in the description, and if you find it interesting, remember to like and subscribe to the channel to receive notifications about the latest episodes. Thanks, everyone. And now, we will begin today's story. Lullaby. After returning to the unit, Khan's wound became infected and had to be transferred to another place with better medical equipment for treatment. Kwaki and I were assigned the task of escorting Khan and 2 other injured lieutenants on their way. At that time, there was no ambulance stretcher like there is now. There was only a hammock tied to a long bamboo stick. Each person had 1 head on their shoulder to walk. From where we lived, it was about more than 30 kilometers, I calculated. It must have taken more than half a day to get there. Taking advantage of the late night, we will set out to avoid clashes with the enemy. I've been familiar with the forest road a lot. As I walked, I kept thinking of images of soldiers in the forest a few days ago. I suddenly shivered, hoping to get there quickly. I didn't know how much poisonous water was left in the sacred forest. Wandering souls anymore? If you say you're afraid, it's not really fear, because if you don't bother them, they won't touch you. And if a living person makes a surprise attack on the enemy side, even if you're afraid, you'll die. As long as there is war, there will be people who die. It's just morning. The brave people stood up and held guns to defend their homeland until their last breath. At that time, after getting over the hill, we followed the stream. Go to the source, and you will arrive. Probably about 6 kilometers more. But after walking for a while, we suddenly heard somewhere in the tall trees, occasionally the sound of a woman lulling her baby. The lullaby sounded resonant, melodious, but very magical, penetrated into my brain, chilling down my spine, mixed with the sound of a baby echoing in the quiet night. I immediately turned around and asked, "Did anyone hear anything?" They all heard it. T was walking in front of me. His arms and legs were shaking. He turned around and whispered to me, "Brother, can I go later? I'm so scared to go ahead. If she shows up, I'll probably have a heart attack and die." I regained my spirit. After all, as a captain, I have to set an example with courage. I glared at him and said, "Fuck me. If the soldiers are cowardly, if they scare me, I'll shoot them with a gun. Dear brother, I bow to you. Please love me. I'm so scared." His voice whispered as he walked away and turned around to speak. Feeling sorry for him, I also changed his position. The boy had just joined the army and was not yet used to it. Sweat was pouring out, beading on his forehead and soaking his shirt. Other comrades chuckled, causing us to regain some composure. After walking a while, T suddenly stopped, making me almost fall backwards. I turned around and shouted, "Are you crazy?" While walking, why stop? But when I looked at his face, His eyes did not look at me. His eyes were facing far away. His teeth were clenched tightly, trying to whisper, "Dear, there it is. It has appeared." I followed inertia and turned back. With his stubborn personality, not afraid of anything, but when I looked up, I was startled and backed away. Quack signaled everyone to be quiet and slowly sit down. In front of us in the distance, probably about 20 meters, there was a figure wearing a white shirt hanging between two treetops, looking very much like sitting in a hammock, swinging back and forth, rocking and lulling a baby. The sound kept echoing from near and far, sounding very magical. When sitting and observing closely, I was shocked to realize that the hammock she was sitting in was her hair. Her hair was so long that it could be tied through two tree trunks. Some of it drooped close to the ground, sometimes disappearing and appearing, blurry. Virtual in the night mist. Regaining my composure, I signaled to take a detour, avoiding approaching her. It seemed that the soul had died unjustly here. As I walked, I prayed, "We are just soldiers standing up to protect our homeland. Now I have to escort injured comrades past. If there is anything that would desecrate your resting soul, please forgive me." T followed behind, keeping his eyes closed, trembling and praying as he walked. We followed the bushes to avoid being detected. When he was about to pass by the ghosts of the mother and child, T couldn't bear it anymore and cried loudly. The sound of lullabies was silent. T's cry tore through the quiet night, the baby's cry, the sound of a mother lulling her child. Suddenly screamed in the air, "Why are you disturbing my child's sleep? Isn't it enough that you took my child's life? I will kill all of you." At that time, I quickly dropped the hammock and carried Khan on my shoulders. He groaned because his wound was bleeding again. He grabbed T's hand and pulled him away. I raised my hand to signal Quack, "Run, run quickly. Run after me." T ran very fast. He ran right past us. "Just aim forward and run, run faster." I screamed. Kahan's heavy body slowed my running. I picked him up and ran while looking back. That soul, gliding through the treetops, its hair like two arms, grasping tree after tree like climbing monkeys. Her eyes were red as blood. Her face was white, only two eyes, and no nose or mouth. As she walked towards us, she screamed in the air, "Where are you going? Give me back my children. I will kill all of you." Khan groaned in my ear. Let me down, he's about to catch up, run away. Don't worry about me. I'm going to die anyway, let me down," I shouted. "Shut up, I won't abandon my friends. If I die, I'll die together, but I have to try my best to live first." Just like that we ran through the forest. I don't know how long we ran. The echoing sound of that woman's soul was silent, but I didn't dare turn back and just kept running forward. I was so tired. I stopped at a grove of trees by the stream. T lay panting, whispering, "Let me go home. I'm so scared, ghosts. Ghosts are coming." Quack patted T's cheek gently. "It's okay. She won't follow me anymore. I'm gone, be quiet. The enemy heard him shoot everyone now." After resting for about 5 minutes, we continued on our way. My shoulders were tired. Just as I was about to sit up, I heard someone's footsteps ahead. I signaled everyone to bend down and stay close to the bushes to observe. In my mind, I thought to myself, "I'm almost here. What else will I encounter after coming here? Pray for us to arrive smoothly." A soldier with a gun was walking past us, but it was dark, and we couldn't tell if it was our side or the enemy's side. I sat quietly and watched, while T covered his mouth with one hand, not daring to breathe loudly, while the other hand held the gun firmly. Suddenly, Quack rushed out and kicked the soldier's feet. face down on the ground, bent his arms behind him, and recited slogans that only my side could understand. Luckily, the soldier also responded, stammering, "It hurts. Let go. Ally. Ally." It turned out to be our side, which was lucky, so we were already in our territory. Helped that comrade stand up and walked towards the center of the unit. As he left, Kwok said, "Luckily it's our side, but the enemy's comrades have already died. Next time, be more vigilant and don't be negligent like this again." The other comrade scratched his head in concern, and then T spoke up. "Do you know the woman who lulls her baby down by the stream? Just now she forced us to run away." He kept silent as he walked. Silent for a long time. We thought he would cry out in fear about that woman, but no, he calmly said, I even know. It's so bad, guys. Go back to your unit slowly. I will tell you, comrades." After a while, everyone came to help Kahand and an injured comrade into the house for treatment. We sat and drank tea together in the yard, discussing the upcoming campaign, but T did not. Holding back his curiosity, he kept asking about that woman. A sergeant calmly said, "She is the wife of a comrade in this unit. A few days ago, the enemy bombed very heavily downstream. We tried to protect this place, resisted very fiercely, but unfortunately that comrade was hit by a bomb. The bomb was thrown directly at him, exploding his body. The wife learned of her husband's death, grabbed her child, and ran out to pick up her husband's body. Burial, we looked at that scene and couldn't hold back our tears, knowing that every day someone died. But seeing the scene of a wife who had just given birth and her husband had passed away was very pitiful. She cried out in the middle of the forest. As we walked, we collected every remaining piece of bone and arm. We tried to stop them, but were unable to do so. After a while, the enemy planes swept even more. They rushed in and shot at the place where we were hiding, the woman and her child. She was also hit and died at that moment. We gathered all the husbands' bodies and buried the three of them together. Sometimes when people patrolling at night, they still see the soul of the woman lulling the child echoing in the night. At first, they were scared, but when they learned that it was the soul of their comrade's wife who had died, it was no longer there. I'm afraid people who died unjustly don't know when they will be freed. Speaking of this, everyone shed tears of emotion. We asked everyone for permission to go to the grave to burn incense. After all, having met and heard about that painful story, we also wanted to do something to help. Comfort the spirits of the deceased. The dead are dead. Hope the spirits will soon be reincarnated and escape. Don't hang around in the world and scare everyone, or escape and pray for the living comrades, so that they quickly won, bringing peace to the country." When I sat down to tell this story, my grandfather also burst into tears. He cried because the war was so cruel. It took away so many of his comrades and compatriots. He cried because he was still alive and enjoying himself. Peace and freedom right now. In the darkness of the jungle, the gunfire has subsided, but the sounds of war still echo through every tree and every rock. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating the winding paths where silhouettes of people moved in silence. They are young soldiers, their young faces still bearing traces of childhood, yes, and now having to face the horrors of war. But there is another fear creeping in the forest. The legend of a dead soldier, who refuses to lie still in a mass grave, but returns as a zombie, threatening the lives of those still alive. It is said that on moonless nights, his figure reappears. eyes red as blood, skin pale and cold as ice, looking for new souls to satisfy his thirst for blood. The story begins on a rainy night when the sound of artillery shells stopped ringing and the sound of water flowing on laves became the only music of the deep forest. A group of 4 American soldiers are looking for shelter, not knowing that they have entered the territory of the returning dead. The rain fell in torrents. Each drop seemed to pierce the leaves, awakening the ghosts wandering around in the forest. They found a hidden cave where they hoped to avoid the rain and be able to rest for the night. But none of them knew that that cave was once the hiding place of a soldier who had become a zombie. When they started a campfire, the flickering flames illuminated the stone walls, revealing ancient paintings, telling of battles and deaths. In the firelight, they saw the image of a soldier with lifeless eyes and his mouth open as if screaming. One of the soldiers felt a cold sensation run down his spine, but he quickly shook his head to dispel it. The night gradually passed. The sound of rain stopped, and a strange silence began to cover the cave. A strange noise began to echo from deep inside the cave, tearing apart the silence. The sound of footsteps was slow and heavy, as if someone was dragging step by step on the rocky ground. John, a soldier in the group, woke up, trying to see if his comrades were joking or not, but he soon realized that everyone around him was fast asleep. The footsteps grew closer and closer, and the darkness seemed to become thicker. He tried to call out to his friend, but his voice was only a whisper, even though he tried his best to shout. When he turned his head, his eyes met the glowing, red eyes of the dead soldier, now standing right in front of him, less than 10 feet away, with an expression no longer innocent. The darkness was as thick as ink, and the dead soldier's gasps echoed like the wind blowing through the crevices of the cave. Yes, John seemed to freeze. The corner of his lips stammered speechless, his heart pounding in his chest as if it was about to explode. He tried to regain his composure and slowly backed away, but his back had already touched the cold stone wall. He knew that he couldn't run away. He couldn't call for help. He could only face the terrifying creature before him. The dead soldier approached, step by step, with his hands outstretched, as if he wanted to grasp the soul of the living. John saw the wound penetrating the creature's chest, where the blood had congealed into a black mass, but there was no sign of pain or death. Its glowing red eyes were no longer human eyes, but the eyes of another entity, an entity that did not belong to this world. In an instant, a gunshot rang out, and the flash of artillery shells tore through the darkness. The dead soldier collapsed. He also lost his limbs, sat down next to the corpse, and breathed a sigh of relief. I just thought it was a nightmare. But the joy soon faded when he realized that the gunshot had attracted the attention of other creatures. Other undeads, who had been their comrades, were now slowly coming out of the darkness, with eyes red and intense desire. In the darkness of the jungle, the whispers of restless souls began to ring out, like a call from the other world. He felt the cold breath of death creeping around him, and the stench of corpses began to hang in the air. He saw blurry figures of people. Their flesh had been eroded by time and insects, leaving only white skeletons, moving with forced movements, no longer alive. The undead slowly approached, step by step, slowly but relentlessly. Their moans were like a ghostly song, the music of madness and suffering. Their eyes were no longer human eyes, just two empty sockets emitting cold light, staring at the soldier's soul. He tried not to look them in the eye, knowing that just one look would be enough to suck the life out of his body. In that fateful moment, John felt a heavy responsibility on his shoulders. He knows that each decision affects not only his fate, but also that of the souls trapped within this nightmare. With courage and determination, he decided not to run away. He began to mutter ancient curses that he had learned as a child, taught by the priest before entering the army, a prayer for the deliverance of ghosts. A dim light began to appear, surrounding him and the undead, as if a higher force was listening to his words. Gradually, the undead began to disappear, blending into the light and being freed from eternal suffering. When the night finally disappeared, a new dawn was breaking, shining rays of sunlight into the cave. He was awakened by other members of the group. John jumped back defensively after being reassured. He remembered what happened last night, knowing that he had done something extraordinary, not only saving himself, but also helping these restless souls find peace. With a light heart and a clear soul, the soldier told everything, from the hours of despair to the miracles he had witnessed. But some people did not believe it. But the remains of that night made it impossible for people to come up with any convincing explanation. Conclude, his story is not only a testament to the power of faith and courage, but also a lesson in respect and a deeper understanding of the world around us. And from there, in the army, he passed on his mantra to everyone, becoming an inspiration to other soldiers who will continue to tell his story for years to come. And this is the end of today's episode.
In the 1970s, the Vietnam War was raging. In a small village forgotten by time and war, there is an abandoned house that has been abandoned for a long time. This house, with its faded walls and crumbling tiled roof, became the subject of many scary stories that the villagers told each other. It is said that in this house, there is a ghost of an American soldier who died in battle without a proper burial. That ghost constantly wanders the house, looking for peace that it can never find. Heavy footsteps, painful sighs, and occasionally sobbing echoed from the lifeless walls. A group of Vietnamese soldiers were assigned to patrol through the village, and they decided to stop and rest in an abandoned house. They had heard stories about the house, but none of them really believed the legends. They think that, after a long day of fighting, a roof to shelter them for the night is more than enough for them to feel grateful. As night fell, and strange noises began to echo from the wall, the youngest soldier, Nguyen, felt an indescribable insecurity. He decided to investigate the source of the sounds, despite his teammates' objections. Nguyen begins to follow the sounds to a secret room, hidden behind a fake wall. In the room, he found an old wooden box containing a faded diary. The diary recounts the life of an American soldier named John, who mysteriously disappeared after a battle. The last page of the diary contains a message written in a different ink, seemingly a warning or an important secret that John discovered before he disappeared. Nguyen felt a strange connection with John through the diary pages. He decides to keep the diary and learn more about the secret John left behind. But from that night, mysterious events began to happen around Nguyen. Clear dreams about John, unexplained signs, and the feeling that someone was always watching him from the shadows. Nguyen began studying the diary every night, the flashlight flickering under the abandoned roof. In the pages, he discovers that John met a Vietnamese woman, Lone, in a nearby village. Lone helped John better understand Vietnamese culture and spirituality, and she also shared with him an ancient secret kept by the villagers. But as the war continued, Lone's village was destroyed, and she disappeared without a trace. John wrote that he could not forget Lone and decided to search for her despite all the dangers. That was the last time John recorded anything in his diary. Nguyen felt a strong urge to learn about Lone and John's fate. He decided to leave his teammates to follow the trail left by the diary. His journey takes him across charred fields, past villages left in ruins, and finally to a forgotten ancient temple where he hopes to find answers. In the temple, Nguyen found ancient paintings and inscriptions, describing an ancient ritual to summon the souls of the dead. He begins to suspect that Loan may have used this ritual to try to protect his village. Maybe John became part of this ritual, and now his soul cannot escape. Nguyen decides to perform a ritual to call John's soul, hoping to free him. In the glimmering light of the candle, Nguyen began the ritual of conjuring the soul according to the ancient instructions he found in the temple. He laid out a circle of ash and placed items related to John: the ring, a piece of cloth from the uniform, and a photo of Loan at key points of the circle. Nguyen began reciting prayers in Vietnamese, then switched to English so John's soul could understand. He prayed to the gods and ancestors to allow John to appear and reveal the secrets he had brought with him into death. As Nguyen chanted the spell, the candles began to flicker, and the wind outside the temple became more intense. A shadow appeared in the circle, and the air turned cold. Nguyen felt an invisible force surrounding him, and he knew that John had responded to the call. John did not speak, but his images and emotions were transmitted into Nguyen's mind. He sees what John has been through, his love for Loan, and the heartbreaking truth about her death. John also reveals that he has discovered a grand conspiracy, a war secret that he was unable to reveal before his disappearance. As the ritual ended, John's ghost gradually disappeared, and Nguyen felt a sense of relief in the air. He knows that he has helped John find peace, and now, he also has the responsibility to reveal the secrets that John has shared. After the ceremony, Nguyen felt a change in the space around him. He knows that he has helped John find peace, but also realizes that he now carries a great responsibility. Reveal the secrets that John shared. Nguyen returned to his teammates, but he was unable to tell them what had happened. He knows that these secrets can change a part of war history, and he must consider carefully before deciding to share them.
In the following days, Nguyen began to realize that he was no longer alone. He felt as if an invisible force was supporting him, as if John was still there, guiding him. And strangely enough, every time he encountered difficulties, solutions came to him inexplicably, as if they were whispered in his ear. Finally, Nguyen decided to write a letter and send it to a major newspaper, revealing part of the secrets he had learned. He did not reveal everything, but enough to cause a stir in public opinion. Those secrets began to gain attention and were gradually investigated by journalists. After revealing the secrets John left behind, Nguyen finds himself caught up in a chain of unexplainable events. He couldn't sleep peacefully, always feeling like someone was watching him. One night, in a dream, he found himself standing in the abandoned house where he had performed the necromancy ritual. In the dream, John appeared before him. He didn't say a word, just gave Nguyen an old wooden box. "This is Loan's," John said. "She left it to you." Nguyen opened the box and found a small painting depicting Loan and John together. Below the painting, there is a handwritten line: "Live for the future so that the lost souls can rest in peace." Nguyen decided to keep the painting and move on with his life. He never forgot Loan and John, but he knew that they had found peace. And on quiet nights, he still feels their presence like formless friends, always by his side, protecting him. And later, when the country was at peace, he organized a large memorial ceremony, inviting people from all sides of the war. During the ceremony, he announced Loan and John's message, a call for reconciliation and forgiveness. The story's ending not only brings peace to the lost souls, but also opens a new chapter for the survivors, where they can look back on the past with forgiveness and hope for a future better. And here the story has ended. A very good and humane story, right?
It was 1972. In the heart of Vietnam, amidst the chaos of war, there was a small village hidden by a peaceful river. This village, like many others, suffered the consequences of the conflict that raged across the land. Amid the bombings and constant fear, a dark legend has emerged, the story of the water-dwelling ghost. Legend has it that this ghost was once a woman who tragically drowned in the river more than 10 years ago. The woman's spirit turned into an evil ghost, haunting the waterways and robbing the lives of those who came near the river where she died. It is rumored that if she wants to be reincarnated, she must force another woman of the same age to go down to the river to take her place. News of this vengeful ghost spread everywhere, reaching the ears of American soldiers stationed in the area. Among them was a brave and compassionate soldier named Lieutenant John Anderson. Driven by curiosity, a sense of duty, and a desire to protect the innocent, Lieutenant Anderson took it upon himself to learn about this legend. One fateful day, as the sun sank below the horizon, a strange red sunset lit up the entire village. Tragedy struck. A child, unaware of the lurking danger, was swept into the river by the water while trying to save his kite that had fallen into the water. When they heard the child crying and struggling in the water, people shouted to each other to save the child. Lieutenant Anderson, who was nearby, did not hesitate and rushed down, trying his best to save the drowning child. The villagers looked at him with both hope and fear as he waded into the water. The river was strangely silent, with only the occasional rustling of leaves and distant gunshots. Anderson looked into the dark abyss, his heart pounding. He saw the child, a boy no more than 5 years old, trying to surface. Its eyes widened in horror as it tried to reach out to him. Using all his strength, Reynolds rushed forward and grabbed the child's hand, but the water seemed to resist, pulling it deeper. He struggled against the current, his lungs burning, but it was useless. As if something at the bottom was trying to cling tightly to the child's legs, he pulled out his dagger and rushed forward. But very quickly the innocent child was swept into an endless dark space, but enough for Anderson to catch a glimpse of a ghostly figure, a haggard woman with long, messy hair, skin as translucent as moonlight. Her hands were like long strands of moss, like dark, slimy hair, winding along the water. The villagers wept as Anderson emerged from the river, empty-handed. The child's fate was sealed, and they whispered about the curse that haunted their village. The drowning ghost will not rest until it has taken what it needs. But despite his best efforts, he still could not save the innocent soul. His hands and feet were shaking. His eyes contained terrible fear when faced with what had just happened. The villagers worked together to search for the child's body for 2 days and 2 nights, but to no avail. Finally, the village chief had to seek guidance from another respected local teacher called the Dharma Master. This wise old man possesses ancient knowledge and mystical abilities far beyond mortals. At noon on the 3rd day since the child's death, the magician arrived in the village. He decided that tonight he would hold a ceremony to find the child's soul and try to free the witch. He asked everyone to find a bowl of rice, a live chicken, and incense for him so he could perform the ceremony. That night the moon was very bright, illuminating the whole area. Curious people in the village came out to see, including Anderson. To the anxiety of the villagers, at exactly 12 o'clock at night, the shaman began performing the sacred ritual. He recited ancient verses, his voice ringing with power and authority. After that, he cut the chicken's neck, and blood continuously poured out, drenching the talismans. He held 3 talismans stained with chicken blood and held them up to the candle. In a moment, the 3 talismans immediately caught fire. Suddenly the wind began to rise. The water surface rippled with small waves. A nearby resident shouted, pointing to a rock near the shore. "There's the little guy. He's emerged." Several young men and Anderson ran out and pulled the child in. His whole body was pale, and his stomach was swollen. His eyes rolled back, causing Anderson to fall backwards. And in the middle of the river, something was slowly rising. The water-dwelling ghost appears, a ghostly figure, half human, half moss. Its body was pitch black. Its face was flat, without eyes or nose, slowly pointing at the magician. And a battle broke out before Anderson's eyes, beyond Anderson's imagination. The magician pulled out a bamboo sword from his body, chanted a spell, and stuck the sword straight into the talisman. The talisman caught fire again. As if possessed by some magic power, the water-dwelling ghost screamed a shrill sound. It tried to move towards the magician very quickly, but it seemed like something was holding it back. The magician kept chanting spells. It happened very quickly, in just 2 minutes, but it seems water-dwelly. The ghost gradually weakens. It screamed shrill sounds, screams that tore through the night, and then it slowly melted into a small stream of water, drifting slowly down the river. The magician also sat down panting. It seemed like everything was over. The next day, the villagers held a funeral for the baby, and the magician prayed for the souls to quickly pass away. The wizard's victory over the water-dwelling ghost became legendary, passed down through generations by villagers. His courage and wisdom dispelled the ghost of tragedy, helping life once again flourish on the banks of the Vietnam River. And so, let this story serve as a reminder of the power of compassion, the resilience of the human spirit, and the unyielding determination to bring light to even the shadows. Dark, 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 darkest. Thank you for listening. May all the best always come to you. If you find it interesting, don't forget to click like and subscribe to make the channel known to more people.